Hey, world history students. All right, today we are going to continue with our World War II Note Booklet. This would be the second video. The first time we went over these, we went over Booklet 1 and part of Booklet 2. So go ahead and pull up those World War II notes if you don't already have them. Remember, we talked about what was in some of these pictures. We went over this first booklet, which was essentially a refresher of our last chapter. Talked about the time between the wars, why countries were starting to go towards more radical, more dictatorial regimes and governments and put their faith in those kinds of people. We talked about rising Hitler and the rising Nazi Party in Germany. We talked about nationalism in different places around the world, and what was going on with them. We started part 2, which was all about Germany's path to war and what was going on in Germany and how they start taking a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more, and the rest of Europe just kind of appeasing them and letting them have these things in the name of hopefully not starting another war, which we know that did not work out. So today we're going to start with Path to War Japan. So if you're not there yet, go ahead and scroll down there. Remember, at any point, if I'm going too fast, you can always hit pause on the video, type in what you need to, and then go back and hit play again. All right, so Japan's path to war. Japan bombed its own people in the Mukden incident. It disguised it as the Chinese so they could justify taking all of Manchuria. So literally, they are bombing their own people, but they're doing it and acting like it was China who did it. This way, when they attack China, the people of their country feel like it is justified. So Japan wanted Manchuria because it offered resources Japan needed. Japan committed to an expansionist policy. So around the same time that, this is actually a little bit before a lot of Germany's expansion, but we've got in Europe, Germany, who's expanding its country. And over here in Asia, we have Japan, who's starting to expand and have this imperialistic style policy. Now, Japan is not a resource-rich island. Has some resources, but that's not their main thing, is natural resources. So in order to get a lot of resources, they relied on this imperialistic style policy of taking over other lands. Well, to justify that, they staged this attack on their own people. So you can see right here in our picture, we got China, and we got this part up here, Chinese Manchuria, the part that they went in and took over. And then Japan would be over here, off to the side. Japan took over parts of Mongolia and China. Japanese militants had taken control of the Japanese government by the mid-1930s. The Chinese sought to appease Japan by allowing them to govern parts of northern China. So remember, appease means to just give in to the demands of someone else or a country in order to keep them happy, in order to keep them from things getting worse. Think of it as your sibling. You've got a younger sibling who's being really annoying and bugging you and bugging you and bugging you. And although you don't want to give in to them, finally you give them a little bit of what they wanted just to appease them and make them quiet and to stop bothering you. Well, that's how a lot of these countries are dealing with Germany and dealing with Japan. Only the outcome is not as good as just appeasing them and making them happy and stopping them. In fact, it has the opposite effect and makes them go for more and more. Japan ends up pushing southward. So China let them govern part of northern China. And then Japan pushes southward and seized the Chinese capital. Despite the brutality and aerial bombing, Chinese citizens continued to resist the Japanese for the duration of the war. So even though China was really outmanned and brutally being bombed and hurt, the Chinese citizens themselves were resilient and continued to resist the Japanese. Japan's goal was to create what they called a new order in East Asia, comprising of Japan, Manchuria, and China. So basically connecting all that part of the world under the Japanese rule. Japan felt that they were ideal to lead the rest of Asia because they were the one Asian country that had already modernized the most. So Japan was, remember we talked about the United States coming over and threatening Japan with their military might. And Japan realized that, oh man, we're way behind and modernizing, much more further behind than we thought. Well, then they started rapidly modernizing, and all of a sudden they become the strongest, most modern Asian country. Well, now because of that, they feel like they are the ones who should be able to take over the rest of Asia and be in charge. So one of the terms you guys should know is puppet ruler. And think of like a puppet, a person controlling a puppet. A puppet ruler is a person or ruler being controlled by another country or ruler. So if I am Germany and Austria is a puppet ruler, or the king of Austria, or whoever I put in charge in Austria is the puppet ruler, then they're doing whatever I say. I'm the one who's controlling the puppet, and their ruler isn't a real ruler. They're just doing whatever I'm saying. So it looks like they have someone in charge, but they're being controlled by someone else. All right. So now we're getting really into World War II. So we're going to start here with the course of the war, course of World War II, Germany's side. All right, so Hitler stuns Europe with speed and efficiency of his attacks on Poland. So a lot of people consider the start of World War II Germany's invasion of Poland. You know, you could point to the actual start of the war in a few different places, but this is where a lot of people consider the start of the war. And their attack on Poland surprised everyone. It was so fast and so efficient that Poland was taken over almost immediately. So his Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, used panzer divisions supported by airplanes. So Hitler used this Blitzkrieg, which was this very fast style of attacking and war, in which these pretty new technology tanks would go in very fast, be supported by airplanes, and people who were being attacked couldn't react fast enough to do anything about it. So it only took Hitler 4 weeks to take over all of Poland. On September 28, 1939, Germany and the Soviet Union divided Poland. Remember, they have that pact. The Soviet Union and Germany have a pact at this point, a non-aggression pact. And after Germany takes over Poland, says that the Soviet Union and Germany can split it up. In May of 1940, Germany makes their way into France. The French had built a defense system called the Maginot Line along its border with Germany. The Germans, however, decided not to go through the line and simply went around it and attacked France from its border with Belgium. So remember from World War I, we had this issue of Germany going through Belgium and then bringing other countries into the war. Well, essentially, they take a similar route, and it takes France by surprise. France had a defense prepared because they share a border with Germany and they blocked that border as much as they could. Well, Germany just went right around that, so it made it essentially ineffective, and it's not good for the French. This attack split the British and French forces. On June 22nd, 1940, France signed an armistice. Germany was now in control of Western and Central Europe. So this map right here shows the area of the Axis expansion. So think of it as like Germany's the head of the Axis powers. So the people who were either allies with Nazi Germany or were now being controlled by Nazi Germany are in red. And that is essentially all of continental Europe. And then even lots of Africa up here or down here. That is a lot. This is for thousands of years, rulers and countries have been fighting to take Europe over. And in a relatively short period of time, Hitler and Nazi Germany has essentially done that. So when we're doing our greatest leader of all time projects, one of the things that the Hitler, whoever's representing Hitler in that, which I think someone almost every year has done it, but whoever's representing Hitler in the competition usually brings up this fact and how successful this was and how he turned this map into a German map. So there's a little blurb here underneath the map. In the course of the war, detailed invasion plans were drawn up by the German military command, such as Operation Tenenbaum, but Switzerland was never attacked. Switzerland was able to remain independent through a combination of military deterrence, economic concessions to Germany, and good fortune as larger events during the war delayed an invasion. So that was just pointing out the fact that you can see all this red, all this Nazi Germany taking over Europe, except for this little yellow spot right here in Switzerland, which still remained neutral. And so what they're saying is even though Germany did have plans to take over Switzerland, it never worked out because either Switzerland gave in to economic demands by Hitler, had military defense, plus Switzerland's hard to take anyway because of the mountains, the Alps, and because it just timing-wise, it worked out well for them whenever maybe Nazi Germany was going to take over Switzerland. Something else popped up, whether it was with Great Britain or eventually with Soviet Union. So one thing you can see here is Great Britain is not under Germany's control. You can see over here that's the island northwest of Germany. So Hitler knew a British invasion by the sea was only possible if Germany gained control of the air first. So because it's an island, you have to get over there by going through the ocean. But you can't just go through the ocean. You need to have them supported by your airplanes or your air force. So in August 1940, the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, launched a major offensive against Britain. The bombing was continuous and devastating to British infrastructure. There's lots of different movies and things out there you guys can see to really see what the London and Great Britain bombing was like, with Germany just constantly bombing them day after day after day after day. Imagine living in a city where every night you go to sleep, you are expecting your house, your place where you work, your school is going to get destroyed and going to get bombed. You don't know who's going to make it through the next day. It was really scary and challenging for the British people. But as the saying goes, they stayed calm and carried on. The British fought back with determination and resilience. The British were supported by an effective radar system that gave them early warnings of German attacks. So, one thing that they did have that proved really, really important for the British was good radar technology. So, they know when the German attacks are coming and they can get some sort of early warnings, both for their military defense and for the people that are trying to stay alive. After a British counterattack on Berlin, Hitler changed his strategy to bombing not just military targets, but British cities and citizens in order to break British morale. So, after his attacking of British military places isn't working over time, he says, forget that. We're just going to bomb people too. We're just going to go straight through the cities and drop bombs on the cities. It doesn't matter who gets hurt or dies. And eventually, the British morale will break and they will give in to our demands. The British people kept calm and carried on, though. After the Luftwaffe's major losses, Hitler postponed the invasion of Britain indefinitely. So after all this bombing, this battling, this air fighting, eventually Hitler and Nazi Germany decided it wasn't worth the effort to take over Great Britain at this time, and so they delayed or stopped. In September 1940, Germany, Italy, and Japan formally signed the Axis alliance. So when we say the Axis powers, this is who we're talking about. The first year of the war were extremely successful for Hitler and Nazi Germany. That's when you get that map we just showed you a second ago. Hitler was smart enough to know he didn't want a two-front war. Remember, this happened in World War I, where Germany's having to fight Russia on one side, and the other allies, we got France, Great Britain, and United States on the other side, and you're trying to fight on either side of you, and it's really hard to do. So Hitler's smart enough, knows he does not want to do that. He learned the lesson from Germany in World War I. Hitler became convinced, though, that Britain only remained resilient in the war because they expected Soviet support. Hitler also saw the Soviet army as pitiful and easily defeated. So Hitler invades the Soviet Union on June 22nd, 1941, believing he could wipe out the Russians before the brutal winter set in. So despite not wanting a two-front war early on, he eventually decides that the Soviet Union is pitiful, will be easily defeated, so we will just invade the Soviet Union, quickly take them over, and then we can focus back on the other side. And we can do this before the winter sets in. We remember what happened to Napoleon and how disastrous that was for him. Well, the German army swept through Russia, but eventually halted within 25 miles of Moscow, the Soviet capital. An early winter and fierce Soviet resistance, however, stopped the German advance. Because of the original plan of invading in the spring, the German soldiers were not prepared for the winter. For the first time in the war, the German armies had been stopped. So again, this combination of a horrible Russian winter stops Germany from getting to the Soviet capital. They got very, very close, took over a ton of land and area along the way, but they don't make their way there because they get stopped by the military and by the winter. And so it ends up being a pretty devastating loss for the Germans. We'll talk a little bit more about it later on, but this is so bloody. This march through Russia is so bloody and so painful, both for the Germans, but especially the Russians, even though they eventually stopped the Germans from making it all the way to their capital. We'll talk more about that later on, but we're going to stop right there for now. So you guys have now finished booklet 2. We will continue on to booklet 3 next time. Some of the stuff, these pictures in here, are stuff we've now talked about. We talked about this is Nazi Party and Hitler rising to power and the crowds coming to see Hitler. There's Hitler giving his impassionate speeches, which he was famous for. It's a picture from the Great Depression, so we talked about that. We're not yet here. Not here. This is a kid getting new shoes during the Great Depression. Not here yet. Not here yet. Not here yet. And then we just talked about this today. This was propaganda from the British government telling their people to keep calm and carry on. We know that this is really hard right now. We know you are being bombed on a regular basis. You don't know who's going to be hurt or what's going to be destroyed. But if we keep calm and carry on, keep doing our best, then we can make it through. We're hearing a lot of similar things right now during this quarantine that all of us are in right now. And we work together, just keep calm, do our best, take care of ourselves. By doing this, we're also taking care of our neighbors and our country as a whole. Now, we're not being bombed every night, but there is a lot of scariness, a lot of death, even stuff that's hard going on around us. And a lot of what our government and people are telling us is to keep calm and do your best to carry on. All right, so we're going to stop there for today. If you guys have any questions, remember you can email me at any time. Hope you guys are doing well. I miss all of you, and I will talk to you soon.